All right, my name is Andrew, and welcome to another deck reveal of a Keyforge deck here. This one I opened at a sealed tournament in San Diego, California at Game Empire, and part of why I'm really fond of it is because it's how I won this lovely mat that I'm recording on top of here, the Mighty Tiger mat. Um, I sort of got second place in the tournament. In real life, it went 4 rounds of Swiss, and there were several of us. I guess three of us who were 3-1, and the person I beat in the fourth round, who was also 3-1, had a better strength of schedule, so he got first prize, which was some nice custom keys or promo keys, and then I and another guy and myself tied for second, and the prizes for second and third were this mat, which is valued at $20, and a $15 gift card, respectively. So he says, "Well, if you give me $5, you can have the mat." And I said, "I think $2.50 would be more fair, but here's three." So anyway, that's how I got the mat. This deck is again the one who usually shoves the Vortex. I derive great pleasure from assuring people that while I do usually shove the Vortex, I occasionally give the Vortex a break. And the deck is Brobnar Logos Untamed. It's very fun, and part of why I love it, there's a particular card that is just fun. It's very fun. I don't know if it's good, but it's very fun. So here's Anger, and there's actually two copies of Anger. Anger's pretty important for Brobnar. I saw a post to the effect that Brobnar is not very good because reaping is better than fighting, and I do think that there's some truth to the idea that reaping is better than fighting. Usually, if you can do one or the other, it's probably better to reap. However, fighting can also be a really important way to clear the board and keep your opponent on their heels. Anger lets you do more with Brobnar creatures. It lets you do more faster, generates that amber. In some cases, Brobnar creatures tend to have knock-on effects from fighting, so it's pretty good and I think pretty important. And having some on-turn amber generation is also extra important for this deck, as you'll see. Okay, next we have Loot the Bodies. It's an action that says for the remainder of the turn, gain an amber each time an enemy creature is destroyed. Very synergistic with the rest of Brobnar. You're going to be blowing up enemy creatures, so why not get some amber for it? See if I can get that camera to stay. Okay. Punch. Also good for destroying enemy creatures. Gains you an amber. Deals 3. Interesting note, if you only have your own creatures out, you're going to have to deal 3 to your own creature. At that point, it probably doesn't matter too much, but just worth noting. It's probably worth it for the amber, but best if there's an enemy creature out. We have a couple of these in here. Sound the Horns. Sound the Horns. You start discarding cards from the top of your deck, and you keep discarding until you discard a Brobnar creature. If you run out of cards, then you stop. If you did discard a Brobnar creature, then it goes in your hand. You got an amber, and you probably get to play a creature. So that's pretty good. It's nice. It's just a nice way to get through your Brobnar stuff faster. It also burns through the deck faster, which I guess has pros and cons, but it burns through the deck. And there's some other stuff in here that actually works really well with that. So it's pretty good. War Song. This is nice to play if you already have some Brobnar creatures out and you can play Loot the Bodies and War Song. You're setting yourself up for a great turn. War Song says for the remainder of the turn, gain 1 amber each time a friendly creature fights. Now, unlike an actual fight effect, like Headhunters fight, gain 1 amber, in the case of War Song, it doesn't matter whether the creature lives. So, if you have Loot the Bodies and War Song out, you can just, trade creatures, and you're going to be gaining 2 amber every time. It's great if you have both cards. Alright, Valdir. Basic, strong Brobnar card. 6 power, but if she's attacking a creature that's on a flank, then +2 damage. Good for knocking out extra big enemies often it's just nice having her be 6 because it means she can fight once and still be around against those 5 strength creatures that are so common. We do have a Headhunter in here. Fight, gain 1, 5. It's a good card. And that sort of mitigates the, oh, but what about reaping? Well, if you have Loot the Bodies and War Song and you're fighting with Headhunter, it's fine that you didn't reap. All right. And this is just a really fun card, Khalifi Dragon. So Khalifi Dragon has 12 power and has, when it fights or reaps, you gain an amber and deal 5 damage to a creature. So that means if you reap, you're getting 2 amber instead of 1, and on top of that, you get to deal 5 damage to a creature. If you fight, you're dealing 12 damage to something, getting the damage back from that, and then on top of that, gaining an amber and dealing 5 damage. That's really strong. It's important to note, if there aren't any enemies out there, you're going to have to deal that 5 damage to one of your own creatures. So, including, that could be to itself, to Khalifi Dragon itself. To mitigate how strong this is, it cannot be played unless you have 7 amber or more. This is extra challenging because Brobnar isn't all about, ramping up amber like, for example, Untamed is. So that's a little bit of a downside here. I've definitely gotten in situations where this is a dead card in my hand, but a good portion of the time I've been able to get it out. It just requires some thinking ahead, some planning, and if you can set yourself up for a turn where you have 4 Brobnar cards in your hand, a creature or 2 on the table, and can, use Anger and Warsong, you can ramp up from 3 or 4 up to 7 in a turn and get this out on the table. And once it's out on the table, it's going to stay for a little bit, unless you're up against Dis and they just have crazy stuff. But it's probably going to stay for a little bit. And it just is great for keeping ownership of the board. You're going to be just blowing your opponent's stuff up and gaining amber while you're doing it. It's really good. Okay. Lomir Flame Fist, 5 strength, or 5 power. Brobnar creature here, and if your opponent has 7 amber or more, they lose 2. I don't like to be in that situation, but it is nice if you're in that situation and you draw this. I would play it anyway. I tend to not keep it around to wait for that moment. It just seems not quite strong enough to matter, but it is good if you end up in that situation. And Smash, 5 strength, or 5 power, and when you play it, you stun a creature. Importantly, if you play Smash and there's no other creatures out, it has to stun itself. So, best if there is an enemy creature out. Stunning is good. We'll see this deck has some other stun in it, and I'll put that back for a second, but this deck has some other stun in it, and between Smash, the Khalifi Dragon, there's some more stuff that's coming up. There's some nice ways to just control your opponent's creatures, not literally control, but to keep them under your thumb and not allow them to go crazy and do stuff to you. So if you can keep your enemy's creatures under control, that's going to make it hard for them to keep up with you on Amber, which is good for you. All right. Bouncing Death Quirk. Sometimes this gets discarded. If you're ahead, it might not be great. When you play it, it's a Logos card, and when you play it, it's an action. You destroy an enemy creature and a friendly creature. You may repeat this effect as many times as you like, as long as it is possible to repeat the entire effect. What that means is, if you have 1 creature and they have 2 creatures, you play it, your creature and one of their creatures will be destroyed, and then you can't repeat the full effect, right? Because now they have a creature, you don't. So you wouldn't be able do as much as you can. Do as much as you can is the part of the rules for Keyforge that says when the rules say, when the card says to do something, but you can't do all of it, just do the parts you can and don't worry about the rest. So in the first instance, let's say that your opponent has 1 creature and you have none, and you play this. It says destroy an enemy creature and a friendly creature. Well, you can't destroy a friendly creature, but you can destroy an enemy creature. So you do as much as you can. You destroy the enemy creature. However, because the text in the second part here says, as long as it is possible to repeat the entire effect, that means you can't go through it again unless you know you can do the whole thing. So Anyway, that's just an important thing to understand about this card. I've been in situations where I have a few wimpy creatures out and play this and obliterate some strong creatures on the other side. It's definitely strong in the right situations. Occasionally, I don't have any creatures I want to get rid of them, and my opponent doesn't have a lot of creatures, so I just discard it. Just very situational. Okay, interdimensional graft. This is the Logos equivalent of Too Much to Protect. It gains you an amber, and if your opponent forges a key on their next turn, they have to give you the rest of their amber. So if they have 9 and they forge at 6, then you're going to get 3. It's definitely strong in certain situations. It's not always strong. If I have this in my hand and I'm playing Logos to play some other cards out, I'm probably going to play this no matter what, because it's going to give me an amber, and it's not probably worth keeping around. If somebody gets exactly 6, it's not so great. And I don't even think it's quite as good as Too Much to Protect, because Too Much to Protect can have support from other cards like Miasma. So if you're playing Too Much to Protect with cards like Miasma, it puts you in this great situation where you can force them to build up amber and then steal a lot of it. But Logos doesn't really have that. So without support, I think it's kind of a just okay card. Sometimes it's great, but not always. All right, lab work, standard Logos stuff. Gain an amber, archive a card. It's strong. I really still think archiving is underrated. Like it doesn't get talked about enough as far as how strong it is. It's very strong. I tend to try to archive a lot of stuff from the same house if I can make that make sense, because then I can just stay in the other 2 houses for a few turns and get to the point where I can have a really big power turn. This can be really great for setting aside a card like Interdimensional Graft, where you're like, hey, I think they're probably going to get to a turn where they have 9, and then I'll want to pull Interdimensional Graft out. It's good for putting Khalifi Dragon in the archive, so you can pull it out on a turn where you're going to be able to ramp up to 7 and play it. So, really good for just expanding your options and keeping cards out of your deck that you probably want later but don't need now. Okay, Neurosiphon, again, situationally good card. If you can play it in a situation where your opponent is 2 amber ahead of you when you play it, it's going to be great. It's going to give you 1, it's going to steal another 1, and it'll make you draw a card. But let's say you're at 3, your opponent's at 4, you play this. Well, first it gives you the amber from the upper left of the card, so you're now going to be at 4, and if your opponent has more than you, doesn't trigger, that you're tied. So you need to be down 2 in order to play this and have it work great. Sometimes you just want to get rid of it. I tend to hold on to this until I can know that the other part is going to trigger, but maybe that's not a great idea. I might be playing that wrong. This is a good archive target as well. If you can't use it now and you have a lot of archive effects happening, then just throw it in the archives and pull it out later when it makes sense. Okay, now 2 copies of this. Phase Shift. Phase Shift lets you play 1 non-Logos card this turn. This is really good in this deck. It means that I can get Brobnar creatures out on the board on the same turn as some Logos creatures, so that next turn I can use them to fight with maybe a War Song. It means that I can, same for Untamed creatures. This might be something I use in conjunction with a Neurosiphon to get a Khalifi Dragon on the board. I know, oh hey, I can ramp up pretty quick on this turn with Logos stuff and then get the Khalifi Dragon on the board. So this just really expands your options. It's also, if you think about it, it sort of improves the consistency of your deck, because it's a turn where you're going to get to dump an extra card out of your hand, right? You're dumping this and 1 extra card that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I think it's a pretty strong card. I'm very happy I don't think I've ever seen it and been sad. Slop. Oh, there is an interesting question, and I don't know a real answer to this yet from FFG. There's a question about if you play 2 of these on a turn, can you play 2 non-Logos cards now, or just 1? And I haven't gotten an answer yet. I submitted a question through the forum. guessing some other people have asked other places, and I haven't seen the answer. So if anybody knows anything, feel free to say so. All right, sloppy lab work. Now, the title would lead you to believe that this is worse than lab work. It is sometimes, but sometimes it's great. Similar to lab work, it gains you an amber, and it makes you archive a card, and then it has you discard a card. Well, sometimes that's really nice. Sometimes it's not. If you have, let's say you have a turn where you have 3 Logos creatures in your hand, you want to play them all to the board, and then you play this. Well, you have your 2 non-Logos cards in your hand, you're going to archive one and discard the other. If one of them is great, well, that's not so good. Although, it does mean you're now going to get to draw 6 new cards, so that's good. Anyway, if it makes you discard a card that you didn't want to, that's a bummer. But I think more times than not, I've been happy to have, to discard and get something new. Because I'm just going to be discarding my weakest card, right? Now, if you, because of the way that do as much as you can works, if you get into a situation where you can play this with only one other card in your hand, you're going to archive it, and then you don't have anything to discard, so that just fizzles. Okay. Crazy Killing Machine. It's fun. I like that this is a card in the game. It just makes it exciting. So it's an artifact, and its action is discard the top card of each player's deck, and then for each of those, you destroy a creature or artifact of that card's house, if able. If you once that's resolved, if 2 cards weren't destroyed, then this thing destroys itself. I've used this in some matchups where there was 100% overlap between my houses and my opponent's houses, and that can be pretty cool because your chances of being able to destroy their stuff are very good. If there's no overlap, then you're pretty much guaranteed to have to destroy one of your own things. So it's less good. It's still okay. It's still not bad because you get to choose out of their things what to destroy, and out of your things. So anytime you're the pilot of destroying 2 things, it's probably okay. Anyway, it's fun. I love that this card exists, and that it can be in a really good deck and be like, this is a swinging card, but here, have it and have fun with it. Okay, Doc Bookton, 5 power Logos Human Scientist, has Reap, draw a card, gives you options while gaining Amber. It's great. And because it's 5, it can be good for fighting too. 2 Ganymede Archivists in here, 3 power Human Scientists that archive a card when they reap. That's also good. Again, I think archive is great. Reaping and archiving, it's fantastic. I'm really happy to be able to use that. I don't get to use it a lot because usually people kill it, but it's really nice. Mother, I just love seeing Mother in a deck. It's get 7 cards instead of 6. That's fantastic, and it's 5. It's just good. And again, for whatever reason, people don't seem super motivated to kill Mother, so get to enjoy it. Okay, now on to the Untamed cards. This is Full Moon. It's an Untamed action. Doesn't gain you any Amber itself, but for the remainder of the turn, gain an Amber each time you play a creature. This can be a good target for Phase Shift if you're in a turn where you're going to put down a bunch of Logos creatures. It's also a good archive target to save up for a turn where you're going to be able to drop some Untamed creatures. If you can play it with like 4 creatures, that's 4 Amber. It's fantastic. Even if you just get 1 for it, it's not terrible. I'd probably usually rather do that and get it out of my hand than hold it around. So it's pretty good, but depends on the situation. Lost in the Woods, gain an Amber. You choose 2 of your own creatures and 2 enemy creatures and shuffle them into their owner's decks. Sometimes I would rather discard this. If I'm ahead, there's a decent chance I want to discard this. If I have 2 creatures that are close to being destroyed anyway, it might be good. If I have no creatures out yet and my opponent has creatures, it's fantastic. So it just depends on the situation. But sometimes if I'm ahead and I want to keep all my creatures out, I might just drop it in the bin. 2 of this one. This is a fantastic card. I love this card. Nocturnal Maneuver. It is an action. It gains you an Amber, and you exhaust up to 3 creatures. Up to 3 is really nice wording because it means if your opponent only has 2 creatures, you don't have to exhaust any of your own. You only have to exhaust theirs. So the up to is really nice, and it's not as good as stunning. But if you can exhaust 3 enemy creatures, if they have 3 creatures and you exhaust them all, you've just ruined their plans for their next turn. So it can be really good. I love the card. Okay, and we'll see some other stuff later that makes it even better. Save the pack, situationally good. If I see Brobnar on my opponent's team, in my opponent's deck, then I'm probably really happy that I have this. Maybe if they have Sanctum, I'm happy. One chain isn't too bad if if you get to destroy maybe 2 creatures or 1 really big creature. One chain is probably worth it. If you're going to destroy 4 or 5 enemy creatures more than your own, then it's definitely worth it. I find it's kind of weird. I find that in this game, creatures don't sit around with damage a ton. So I feel, well, it depends on what cards are in play, but there are definitely games where it's very rare to have creatures have damage, and so this ends up kind of just being a dead card. Usually, if I can't use it on the turn, if I have it in my hand, I'm playing Untamed, and I don't want to use it right now, I'm not going to keep it around most of the time. So my other one, yeah, I'm not thrilled that I have 2 of those, but it worked out okay. All right, Big Twig is big. He's a 7 power creature. No special requirements on getting him on the board. He can only fight stunned creatures. I've almost never used Big Twig to fight. Things like to fight him, and he destroys them. That's fine. And most of the time, I'm very happy to just use his Reap ability. When you Reap with him, you stun and exhaust a creature. That means it's stunned, and if they choose that creature's house on their next turn, they don't even get to unstun it. That's fantastic. And again, I mentioned one of the things this deck is really good at is controlling, not literally taking control of, but pushing around the opponent's creatures and just saying, hey, you don't get to do what you want to do with that creature. And this is one big way that the deck affects that, is by keeping their creatures stunned and exhausted. Again, we have Nocturnal Maneuvers, which contributes to that as well. You get to exhaust 3 enemy creatures. So if you play that on a turn where you also Reap with Big Twig, you're getting to exhaust 4 of their creatures and stun 1 of them. It's just fantastic. Briar Grubbling is okay. Probably want to use it to Reap. If something attacks it, it's going to get hurt. I feel like if I had a good upgrade to throw on here, that would be fantastic to make an enemy really want to kill this, but I don't feel like people have a huge incentive to do much about this. But it's a good protection against skirmish, right? Because if it's attacked, it gets 5 damage before the attack happens. So skirmish doesn't get around that. So that's cool, but I just don't feel like there's enough of a magnet for the enemy to actually want to deal with this. So it's okay, but it's not great. 2 Dew Fairies. These are great. They are only 2 power. They're wimpy little things. But they have elusive, so that helps them stay on the board a little bit. And when you Reap with them, you gain an extra amber. So that's pretty fantastic. And that's, well within this theme of Untamed being about just ramping up the amber quickly. So if you can have those on the board, that's pretty good. Murmook slows your opponent down. It's a 3 power beast, and it makes your opponent's keys cost 1 more. So they are going to want to deal with that. And usually they do, but it's 3, so it has a little bit of staying power. It can survive a little bit. It's annoying for them to deal with, unless they have a Kehoe. And lastly, Witch of the Eye. And at this tournament where I opened this, the guy who ended up getting first place asked me, which witch would you rather have? And I thought about it for a little bit. By the end of the tournament, I definitely was convinced Witch of the Eye is the better witch to have. Witch of the Eye has only 3 power. When she reaps, you return a card from your discard pile to your hand. And I got into a couple of situations where I was able to have Witch of the Eye on the table along with the Big Twig and a Nocturnal Maneuver in the bin. And this was stupid. And having, a Dew Fairy on the table too just made it particularly egregious, because I could reap with the Dew Fairy for 2. That's great. Reap with the Big Twig and stun and exhaust an enemy creature. Reap with Witch of the Eye and pull the Nocturnal Maneuver back in my hand. Play the Nocturnal Maneuver, gain another Amber. Now we're up to 5 in this turn, and exhaust up to 3 creatures. So basically, if the opponent only has 4 creatures, which is quite a lot of creatures, I mean, really, that's a good number. If they have 4 or fewer creatures, I've completely wiped out their ability to do anything with those creatures on their next turn, barring some sort of anger or something like that. And on top of that, I've their whatever their biggest baddest creature is, I've stunned it too. So that's just fantastic. If you can get that going, and then get into a situation where you have Khalifi Dragon, it can be pretty good. What this deck is weak against is Amber manipulation. If you're playing at Shadow, that could be not very fun. I lost a game to a Sanctum with Epic Quest because they were just able to forge that 3rd key when I wasn't ready for it. So there are definitely situations where this deck doesn't work out. It depends on establishing that board control, and if you're playing at Shadows, then the board control may not quite be enough. You're still going to have to work hard to win. But overall, it's pretty strong, and it's really fun. The Crazy Killing Machine, the Big Twig, the Witch of the Eye, the Khalifi Dragon, the Sound the Horns. Those are just all really fun cards that accelerate your gameplay and just do wacky stuff that I think wouldn't be allowed in a constructed format. So I really enjoy it, and I hope you enjoyed watching me explain it. Have a great day.